Min Canada here. You are listening to the Activism Global on Wheels podcast hour, the place to be to learn about the latest and greatest life stories from people who are doing incredible disability advocacy work. Christina Ryan, welcome to the Activism Global on Wheels podcast hour.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course, we're so happy to have you. So I'm going to read a short bio about you to familiarize our viewers, okay? So Christina Ryan is the CEO and founder of the Disability Leadership Institute. She has been an active leader in the Australian disability community for over 20 years. Christina pioneered the use of mainstream forums by women with disabilities at the United Nations, and now mentors and teaches effective use of the UN for rights activists globally while working as a leadership coach for people with disabilities. After 20 years working in community sector management, Christina realized that the levels of violence and marginalisation experienced by people with disabilities were the direct outcome of inequality, and that to address this, we need a growth in leadership right across the public domains. So Christina established the Disability Leadership Institute in 2016. It is the first organization of its kind globally run by and for disability leaders. So welcome again, and we'll kick off our first question with, so if the top level of the organization is a person with a disability, how does this affect the organization overall, rather that be in regards to culture or bottom line or organizational structure or what have you? How does that affect the organization, the company?
Quite a lot. Our focus has been on really pushing for people in positions of leadership. And the reason we do that is because culture within an organisation comes right from the top. And if you don't have people of diversity in those senior positions, so we're talking about the board, we're talking about CEOs, the executive leadership team, and the people in that sort of responsibility area, if those people are not diverse people, including disabled people, then the organisation is unable to understand what diverse people require. It also is unable to speak the language of diversity to the people who are working there. It's also unable to speak the language of diversity to the community that it is serving. So its customers or the community that it works for, whatever type of organisation it is, including government. So it's really important to have disabled people at the top. And when we say having disabled people at the top, we mean openly identified disabled people. And it's a question I'm often asked, what do you mean by disability? It's really common for disability to be something that a third party will decide you have. But the only person who can decide you are disabled or not is you. It is a self-identity. And so I openly identify as a disabled person. I talk about being disabled. I am part of the disability community. I identify as being a disabled person. If we don't have people in leadership positions who openly identify as disabled, then nobody else in the organisation is able to look up to them. So it's really important that we have openly disabled people and that those people are in quite senior positions. What it tells us is that that organisation, that company, that business, that university, whoever it is, values the contribution of disabled people. That's a very strong message to be sending because, of course, until recently, historically, the opinions of disabled people were not regarded highly and were not often included. And so for a company to openly value disabled people is a really big cultural shift. The thing that will make the difference is that anybody coming in at more junior levels has someone to look up to. And of course, if you have nobody to look up to, and we know about this from gender and from race, we know that if you have no one to look up to, then it's very hard to feel like you belong. It's very hard to feel that the decisions that are being made at the top include you or understand you. So it's really important that we recognise that diversity is quite broad and we need to be covering all of it at the top to make sure that people feel comfortable within the organisation.
Exactly. So you once wrote, I'm quoting you, "I don't need to point this out, but there's not many of us in Parliament in this country. We're not on the Australian Stock Exchange 200 boards. We're not even on the boards of the community sector, which is doing the work that supports us. We're not on TV or journalists, not the people driving public opinion. We just aren't the ones making the decision, and it will take an enormous effort to shift that. But that's what the DLI is going to do. We must be in those places as equal participants." So how has the Disability Leadership Institute, DLI, help people with disabilities get into these spaces?
We've done a number of things. The first one is to simply exist. The fact that the Disability Leadership Institute exists has changed the conversation. Before we were there was no specialist work being done on disability leadership. None at all. And the only qualification for leadership programs involving disabled people was that you needed to be disabled to get into the program, but that was the end of it. No, that was it. Simply by existing, we've changed that conversation. One of the most common things people say to me is, "Oh, I never thought of that." Of course they didn't. If you're invisible, if you're not in the room, people forget about you. That makes sense. Turning up and starting to talk about disability leadership has changed the conversation. We also have a number of things that we do. We provide a service where people can advertise their positions to all of our membership. And so they ask us to share a board opportunity, or they ask us to share a senior leadership opportunity, and we put that out to our membership so that more disabled people are encouraged to apply for positions. We're just at the beginning of that process. That is a long process. It's probably going to take many, many years to see any really tangible outcomes. Another thing that we do is we have a members community. And so by supporting disability leaders who are often, as I said, the only person in their organisation, they may feel very isolated. They may be experiencing daily prejudice from colleagues and from the organisation as a whole. And so having somewhere to go where they can talk about the issues that they're facing, talk about their experiences, and consider how they might address them, consider how they might change what's happening, or how they can manage what's happening so that they're able to survive it, has really assisted people to break the isolation, to feel that they're able to continue. And it must have been like this, 40 years ago, when women started moving into very non-traditional roles, when they first started moving into engineering and science and building and even politics, certainly the law. Women formed groups, network groups, to support them to survive being alone in a very male environment. We're doing something similar to that for disability leaders, supporting them to be on their own in a very non-disabled environment. So that is a significant change. And I think the other thing that we're doing, which we are really quite proud of, is our major leadership program, where we work on using our disabilities as an asset in our leadership. No other program anywhere in the world does this. And it's classic mainstream leadership work and theory, but because we have a focus on using our disabilities and making sure that we are not hiding them, we're not trying to pretend they're not there, which is the usual thing that people do. We're using our disabilities, we're feeling confident about them, we know what they bring for us, we know how they help us to operate, we know the different perspective that they provide, and we also know the different ways that they assist us to operate. And everybody is slightly different, so it is different for everyone. But what we've seen for people who are going through that program, and certainly for the people who've graduated from it, the alumni group, is they operate very differently. It's that classic thing about if you're able to be your whole self, if you don't have to conceal or hide who you are, if you're not ashamed of who you are, then it makes a very big difference to how strong you can be and how powerful you can be.
Mhm. Thank you for that. So now we're going to touch on disability at large. So you once said disability activism is particularly siloed. You can really get stuck in it, unquote. How do we get unstuck and come up with innovative ways to progress the disability movement?
It is very siloed. Many of the people I know and have worked with over a long time have only ever done disability. That's it. And that's fine. We've got a lot to do. So that's all right. The thing is, we're a really intersectional community. We're a highly intersectional community. You're talking about such a large proportion of the global population. So of course we're intersectional. We have a lot of touch points around other areas of disadvantage and marginalisation. So it's important that we recognise that. It's important that we work intersectionally, that we don't just stick within our narrow understanding of our own space. But I think there's something more than that, is we need to see more disability leadership in the mainstream. So going out there and, for example, working in the environment movement, and that's a huge space. It's global. There's a lot going on. Being openly disabled in the environment movement, we know that climate change will have a massive impact on disabled people. We're always the first people to experience difficulties when there's change. And we're seeing that with the current pandemic. Disabled people were the first people that had to become isolated and will be the last people at the end of it all. And yet we're not making the decisions. So it's really important that we get out there into the mainstream and start to use our skills, our knowledge in that wider decision-making space. If we don't do that, for a start, we get forgotten because we're invisible. We're not in the rooms where decisions are being made. If we're invisible, people don't think about us when they're making decisions. We've seen a lot of that with responses to the pandemic. There's had to be a lot of going back and thinking again and coming up with special disability plans when a lot of the other work had already been done weeks before. So if we're not getting out there and participating in the broader change making space and the broader decision making areas, we are going to continue to be left to one side. We continue to be invisible. Disability will never be something that's factored in. So while we need to think about being intersectional, we also need to be making sure that the rest of the world remembers we exist. And the only way the rest of the world will remember us is if we're in the room with them. We have to be in the room. We won't be changing anything until we're in the room and we're part of the decisions.
Mm-hmm. And the people are receptive to listening to us as equal members, right?
Absolutely. If we're in the room, we must be in the room as equal participants. It's as simple as that. Not the token person with disability. And of course, because we are, in most Western countries, we're 20% of the population. Globally, we're 15% of the population. That's mainly about how some countries count disability. So we know there's a lot more disabled people than are accounted for by the World Health Organization. But what it means is we need multiple people. We need 15 or 20% of people in a room to be disabled people. Then you get the diversity of our community and you get better decisions. Of course you do.
Mm-hmm, exactly. So I know you do some coaching in your work. What is your top coaching advice for leaders with disabilities?
Stop saying sorry. It seems a bit funny and a bit trite, but I spend a lot of my time stopping people from saying sorry. We don't have to apologise for who we are. We're all trained to say sorry. And in fact, what we have at the Disability Leadership Institute is a sorry jar. And every time somebody says sorry in one of our groups or in a coaching session, they have to put 5 cents in the jar. It's a virtual jar. It doesn't really exist. But some days we get a lot more money in the jar than others. And what we often see is people, when they're under pressure, when they're having a bad patch, they might not be travelling very well for whatever reason, or when they're feeling uncomfortable, if they're outside their comfort zone, they'll start to apologise. We have to stop apologising. We are equal participants in the community. We are part of the world. We need to get out there and claim our space. We need to own it. Stop saying sorry.
That's very good advice. So I know you do some keynote speaking as well. Being a keynote speaker, you always share success stories of people with disabilities, among other things. Can you see the positive impact these successes have had on others? Can you share a concrete example of how your audiences have been inspired by the experience of those successful individuals with disabilities?
It's a fascinating area, Ming. One of the things I've noticed is I'm often the only disabled person who's speaking at a conference or at a forum. And simply being there, being in the room, and because I come with the hardware, so I'm obviously, I'm visibly disabled, it makes a very big difference to the conversation and how it sounds and what's covered. And one of the things that it also does is it disrupts people's assumptions about disabled people and what we can and can't do. And it's really fascinating to see that change happening in people's heads, to see the questions that are asked, to hear the sorts of shifts that people make in their assumptions, suddenly realising that disabled people aren't all people who require high levels of support and who live in care homes. That's a really small proportion of us. It's actually well worth saying as well, though, that plenty of those people are able to be out there being leaders in the world if they're given the opportunity and the support. Most of them are not. It disrupts the prejudice of people. And what it can do, and I have seen it happen over the Disability Leadership Institute is about to have our 4th birthday. And so in 4 years, what we've seen is a much larger number of people being invited to speak, a much larger number of people being talked about, being understood, and particularly being recognised as the experts that they are in whatever field it is. It may not be disability. That change is the change we want to be seeing. That respect, that understanding, that embracing of the equality of disabled people.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. So, our last question is, over your 20 years or more of advocating for people with disabilities in Australia, what are some of your proudest achievements thus far?
I think one of the things that I'm really particularly proud of is the recognition that disabled people should be appointed to positions of decision making. We've reached a point now where that is expected. And if a disabled person is not appointed, questions are asked. And I think that's a very big change. I think the recognition that disabled people need to be in the room is something that I'm also very proud of. I'm not the only person who's done those things, because when you're part of a movement, there's a lot of people involved. There's certainly things that I have been part of assisting with. And I think the other thing that I'm particularly proud of is the recognition, which is still very early, of the levels of violence experienced by the disability community, particularly women. Disabled women account for half of all reported incidents of violence. So the police statistics, half of them are disabled women. Actually having that statistic collected is a victory. Having the media discuss violence against women with disabilities, having it prepared to talk about it, and having governments sometimes understand they still don't do anything about it. So there's been some shift in understanding that our lives are not all lovely. Our lives can often be very difficult, very brutal. That change is just beginning to happen now. I think, being part of some of that work has been extremely rewarding, very hard. It's very hard work. But seeing the change, seeing the recognition, seeing the increasing numbers, particularly of disabled women who are out there, who are speaking up, who are talking in the media and who are making it clear that our lives are valid and necessary parts of the community has been incredibly rewarding work. I could die tomorrow and I would be very happy to have done that and nothing else. I've still got plenty of time to go and I will do more things, but that alone has been very satisfying, and I could live with that as a single thing that I've done.
Yeah, we definitely know it's hard work, and thank you so much for your hard work for all these decades, and for coming on our show. And good luck with your future endeavors.
Thanks so much for having me, Ming, and people can look us up at disabilityleaders.com.au if they'd like to know more about the Institute.
Did you like this video? If so, share with your friends and be sure to follow us on social media. And if you want even more resources, be sure to sign up for our email updates on our website, traipsingglobal.com. Keep learning new perspectives, keep being inclusive because it will make the world a better place for you and for everyone else. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on another episode of the Traipsing Global on Wheels podcast hour.